What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Vault. Today, we're going to be breaking down the 2026 top running backs coming into the fantasy football season. We're going to break this down into a series. Today's obviously pertaining to running backs. I'm going to be making a video on wide receivers as well as quarterbacks and tight ends as well. So make sure you stay tuned for those. The big thing with the running backs this year is still the position that can completely change your fantasy draft. There's going to be three major backs that I believe can realistically separate you from the entire field. But after that, there's almost every player comes with some type of major question, whether that's age, injury, efficiency, a new team, or they're a committee back. But I'm ranking my top 31 running backs. I'm going to be placing them into 5 tiers and giving you the reason, the risk, and the draft case for every single player. Looking at this graph and the tier list right here, this is going to be the same structure that we're going to be using going forward for the wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends. So you'll see ADP in red. That is their current average draft position at the time of making this video. And then you'll also see on the right side, you'll see a green lock. So that is my current ranking for them at the time of making the video. You'll see as a pretty much consensus that my ranking is higher than the ADP. And the reason for that is because I am not very high on the running back position this year. I think that they're very overvalued right now. I think this is like the most we've seen them valued going into a season, at least here recently. So I think with that, I think you're going to be able to feast on getting some wide receivers. So let's break it down. So tier one, these are just overall RB1 candidates. These are the three backs that I believe have the fewest ways to fail. They all combine elite talent, receiving production, as well as a very high ceiling. And we've seen proof of that from every single one of these guys. So my RB1 coming into the year is actually Bijan Robinson. It's not the consensus Jahmyr Gibbs. Bijan is coming off a 2,300 scrimmage yard season where he only scored 11 touchdowns. And with them losing Tyler Algier, I believe that he truly has zero competition in there. There's no reason for him not to get the touchdowns. And then in terms of receiving, the only person he's competing for really is Drake London. That's the only competition he has for receiving. So I'm expecting RB1 Bijan Robinson. Jahmyr Gibbs, you see that I've got him down as on my number 4. That's just because, like I said, I think that the running back position is overvalued. I think he has a very good case this year to be the RB1. I can't fault you for putting him as your number 1. With that being said, there's been some stuff that, for me at least, that I've seen. Like I said, the value I don't think is there. I think that with Pacheco coming in and Montgomery leaving, I think that that's good for him. I think that that's going to give him more of a workhorse role. But also with Jahmyr, I think that his touchdown ceiling, I'm wondering if he can repeat that. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to do that. But his lines are looking good, so he's an RB1. They increased his workload last year. He became one of the most dominant players in fantasy football. Now with him gone, Pacheco is involved. Gibbs no longer needs to share the backfield the same way that he previously did. Okay, and on to Christian McCaffrey. So Christian McCaffrey, we know is probably one of the most, if not the most dominant fantasy running back of all time. His only problem is obviously injury concerns. Coming into the season, last year, he hit a career high for carries, and that's truly never good for running backs, especially at his age, and he's already dealt with injury concerns the past few years. But if he is healthy, and I think early in the season, we'll be able to tell. He's not really competing for targets. I think George Kittle's going to be more of a red zone threat. I don't think that he's going to be your explosive play guy. They lost Jauan Jennings as well. So really there's no target competition that he's facing. And even if he was, he's still going to get his targets and stuff like that. But I do think he regresses a little bit in terms of carries and overall volume. Now coming into tier 2, this is where the ceiling remains elite, but every player has one concern. preventing me from placing them alongside the top 3. First one being Jonathan Taylor. His ADP is currently going at 9. I've got him at 10, so pretty on par. I think Jonathan Taylor is just a safe bet. He led the NFL with carries and touchdowns. He scored 18 touchdowns last year, which is huge. Also set career highs in receptions. But the big thing is coming off of that, I do think that the workload and the touchdown regression is going to be real. But I do truly believe that he is and I think the quarterback situation is kind of up in the air, but I expect it to be Daniel Jones, and I expect him to rely heavily on the run game. So taking him at 10 is fine, and I think that as long as Daniel Jones keeps this offense functional, Jonathan Taylor should remain an elite RB1. Ashton Jeanty. So Ashton Jeanty last year was not dominant, was not very explosive. Yards per carry was low. But the big thing is that they invested into the offense. That was the big thing this offseason. They obviously went out and got Fernando Mendoza. They went and signed Tyler Lindenbaum to a big contract this offseason. So I think he has a better situation this year, especially coming in with Clint Kubiak. I think that surrounding him with these pieces and the coaching staff, I think that Jeanty has a great floor here. I think his ceiling's high, but he has a great floor. I think that we're looking for a huge sophomore year from Jeanty. Okay, so Devon Achane, he led the NFL actually in yards per carry. He's extremely efficient. Caught 67 balls for about 500 yards just in the receiving game, rushing for 1,350. So he is one of the most efficient backs that we've seen here in the past few years. But the big thing with him is now, obviously, the quarterback situation. How good is Malik Willis? Is he going to, be the check down machine that Tua is? So Devon Achane, I've got him actually one ahead of the current ADP that he's going at. So I've got him at 14, and the current ADP he's going at is 15. Now, with that being said, I think that Achane is extremely efficient. I think he's a wonderful fantasy running back. I think he's great. But the big thing is with me is the workload that he's coming off of last season, as well as the team didn't get better. So I don't think Miami's going to be very good. I think they're going to be behind a lot. I don't think they're going to be able to just run the ball. They're going to have to air it out for time's sake. So with that being said, he's also coming off of a surgery this offseason on his shoulder. But he doesn't have any competition. Like I said, I don't expect Miami to be great at all. So I think he's properly priced. So now with James Cook, and so this is where you truly see where I think the value of the wide receiver comes into play with the ADPs. For the rest of them, you'll see very large jumps for the rest of the players in the video, throughout the video. So James Cook is coming off. He is our reigning rushing champ. He led the league in rushing yards last season and also totaled 14 total touchdowns. Honestly, I think that he's just limited. He's a for surefire bet. He's the RB1, no competition in the backfield. But the problem is a lot of the times you'll see Josh Allen taking carries, especially near the goal line. And but he's got a lower floor than the people ranked ahead of him. But for surefire bet. Next is Saquon Barkley. So Saquon, I'm expecting a bounce back year from Saquon, but looking at it, all the issues that they had last year with all the drama that was going on with A.J. Brown and the play calling was horrendous. I think it was just a bad year. The injuries on the offensive line. I think it was just a combination of a lot of things for Saquon. Also coming off the year with 2,000 rushing yards in 2024. I think that it was just a combination of a lot of things, and I'm expecting a bounce back year this year as long as the offensive line stays healthy. He was not bad last year. He's simply fell from a historic season to a normal high-end workload with all the other stuff that was happening, as I just mentioned. The concern also is age and whether or not what they're going to do in this new offensive scheme. I'm interested to see how it goes moving forward. So next on here, we've got Omarion Hampton. We've only got a small sample size of 9 games with him, but those 9 games were pretty good, pretty telling. He got 737 scrimmage yards in those 9 games and 5 touchdowns off 156 touches. So before he went down with the injury in those 9 games, he was averaging 15.5 PPR points per game. So I'm expecting him to come in with Mike McDaniel coming in, who was with Devon Achane, and while he was putting up those big numbers in fantasy, so I expect Omarion Hampton to really have a great year. He's set up pretty good for it. So, and also with Omarion, he's in a better situation this year. They were decimated with injuries on the offensive line. And also, he should be coming back healthy, so I'm expecting big things from him. Now, at the end of Tier 2, I've got Chase Brown, who actually last year totaled just below 1,500 total scrimmage yards, which is pretty shocking, but he's been a PPR monster the past few years. With everything with Ja'Marr Chase and all that, I mean, he is the workhorse back in that backfield. There's nobody that's competing with him now. He is the clear RB1 there in Cincinnati. I think that his biggest advantage is that Cincinnati trusts him in every single situation. You know, he rushed for more than 1,000 yards. He caught 69 passes, and he scored 11 times. I like the player, and I like the role, but 6 receiving touchdowns is going to be hard to repeat. So I think that's going to come down, but I still think his receiving volume will still stay pretty high. So now moving on to the third tier we've got here. So this is the veteran and situation risk tier. Every one of these players can finish as an RB1, but age, offense, injury, workload uncertainty makes the range of outcomes wider for this tier. So starting off with this tier, we've got Kenneth Walker, the reigning Super Bowl MVP, K9, moving over to Kansas City. So with him moving over to Kansas City, I think he's going to provide them with a lot that they've been missing since Kareem Hunt when he first came onto the scene a few years ago. I think that he's going to provide them with a lot, but I think that he's got an injury history. I think that that's something to also factor in. I do not think that they're going to be a heavily run team, not with Patrick Mahomes, but you might be seeing that more years coming forward. But anyways, but Patrick Mahomes is coming back from a serious knee injury. So I think that's going to limit him in terms of his mobility when he does come back. And so I think they are going to, especially earlier in the season, I think they're going to rely heavily on K9. So I think he's got potential to put up a big year. But in my opinion, I don't think he's worth it at the 16. At the beginning of the middle of the second round. I don't think he's worth it. But I'd put him more towards the 2-3 turn personally. But this last year, Kenneth Walker did stay healthy for an entire 17 games. He rushed for more than 1,000. He led them to the Super Bowl, and now he's on Kansas City, and they paid him like a feature back because of his explosiveness. The receiving ceiling is kind of uncertain at this point, but the talent, the contract, the scoring environment, it gives him a legitimate RB1 path. Okay, so now to Josh Jacobs, who is kind of in the middle of a gray area. I've actually got him higher compared to ADP. I think that the big thing with him, I think he is and will produce as an RB1, but I think the big thing with him is obviously the off-the-field concerns. I don't think that he's going to have any punishment this year. I think if anything, it'll happen next year. So this year, he's safe. They still trust him as their goal line back. He's produced 14 or more touchdowns in the last 2 seasons. His ranking is lower also because the efficiency has been kind of normal, kind of ordinary, and the knee kind of became an issue. But when he's active, he's definitely valuable enough to be an RB1. Derrick Henry, the king. We've got the king. So Derrick Henry is going into this year. He's going to be turning 32. I mean, it's just every year he's producing, and he still is playing like last year he played all 17 games. I mean, it's truly remarkable, but I do think we see a regression this year. He's not going to catch many passes. Everyone knows that. But I think that this is the year that we start to see a regression in the king. So next I've got Breece Hall. Even last year with the difficult environment that he's in being on the Jets, he still amassed 1,400 scrimmage yards. He rushed for just over 1,000, and he caught 36 balls. So they also extended him to a multi-year contract this offseason. He doesn't have any competition. Braylon Allen's coming off of an injury. The problem is the risk with him is he only scored 5 touchdowns last year, which brought his PPR total down to only 13.1. And so the biggest thing is going to be figuring out the quarterback situation and just the scoring environment that he's around. And so those are going to be the biggest risks with Breece. But he still has the receiving profile and the talent to outperform this ranking. But the Jets must give him more scoring opportunities before I can move him up my board. Next, we've got the rookie Jeremiyah Love. So this is an interesting one because obviously he's got top 10 draft capital. When they went in the offseason, got Tyler Algier. They've still got Trey Benson and James Conner, which I imagine one, if not two of those, are going to be gone come day one of the season. But the big thing with him is, he's a do-it-all back. He can do everything. He is one of the best running back prospects we've seen in the past few years, along with Jeanty. But the big thing is I don't think the Cardinals are going to be very good at all. I don't think they're going to be running the ball a ton. I think they're going to be behind in a lot of games. I think they're going to be having to be airing it out, just like Achane and the Miami Dolphins. And he's also competing with a lot of competition. So ADP's got him at 26 overall, going into the early first, and I've got him all the way down at 41, so mid-third. So great. He has a high ceiling, but I think his floor is still very low with the competition. So next is Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams has been a continuous back that Sean McVay has shown that he has trust in, major trust. At the end of last year, we did see where Blake Corum ended up becoming more involved in the offense, and I think that is something to look into. I don't think that Kyren is going to be able to score the same way that he has. But what we've seen the past couple years with Sean McVay and Kyren is his workload has actually been decreasing year by year. So I think this is a pretty fitting because I do expect Blake Corum to get involved pretty decently this year. So Travis Etienne moving over to the Saints. So last year was one of his career years over in Jacksonville with 1,400 scrimmage yards, 13 touchdowns, with 6 of those coming from the air. So he signed with New Orleans, which Alvin Kamara is still there. I don't expect him to be there come day one. I expect it to be Travis Etienne and Devin Neal in that backfield. I think he's going to come in. I think depending on how Tyler Shuck operates, they brought in Jordan Tyson. They've got Chris Olave. I think he's just in a really good situation. So, and he's not going to have any competition as long as Kamara isn't there. Javonte Williams is coming off of a career year with the Dallas Cowboys. I think that the Dallas Cowboys are going to be another good offense again this year, GP and CD. I think that Dak Prescott's going to air it out. I think Javonte is going to repeat. I don't see why he wouldn't. He did cool down on the second half of the year, and most of his fantasy production did come through touchdowns. But I think that, like I said, I think that's going to continue this year. I think it's going to be pretty much the same. So I've got him as my RB18 coming into the year. Okay, so tier 4, this might be the most important tier in the rankings because these are the backs that can outperform their price or become frustrating committee running backs. And starting off, we've got Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving is a great talent. He has been dealing with injuries, and last year he dealt with an injury all of last year. Pretty much all of his stats fell from the 2024 season before. Now, they did get rid of Rachaad White, who's now with Washington, but they bring in Kenny Gainwell. I think he's going to eat into the receiving work, and I think also on the goal line, I think that Sean Tucker is going to get some goal line carries and take away some touchdowns. So I think Bucky's ceiling is limited. I think his floor is kind of high compared to some in this tier, but I think he has a low ceiling with Tucker and Gainwell there. and also trying to just keep him healthy. So I think that they're going to play more of a role this year than they did last year. Next, we have Cam Skattebo, who, when he was on the field, was the workhorse, clear RB1, and was played great. And up until, obviously, the gruesome ankle injury. And during his 8 games, he scored 7 touchdowns. So, I mean, extremely efficient. And I think that New York loves him. I think the coaching staff loves him. He's got a good relationship with Jackson Dart on and off the field. I think that if they come into the year and also with them coming into the year, Malik Neighbors, we're not really exactly sure what's up with him so far because I've not really heard any positive reports out of his camp. So I think they're going to come into the year relying a little more on the run at the beginning of the year. So we'll get a good beat on how they're going to use him and Tyrone Tracy through the first few weeks of the season. Okay, so next on this, at my RB21, we've got Quinshon Judkins in Cleveland. Last year, he rushed for 800 yards and had 7 touchdowns with 26 receptions. He only finished a few yards shy of 1,000 scrimmage yards despite playing in 14 games. But the problem was they struggled behind a bad offensive line that was decimated with injuries. And also, he did suffer a fractured fibula last year and dislocated ankle. But he's expected to be back. He's going to be the clear early down. I don't think that Dylan Sampson really is much of a competition there. I think that with him putting almost 1,000 yards up as a rookie with that offense, I think is pretty telling. I think he's going to be the goal line back, and we're just going to have to see, early in the year how they go with his workload, and Dylan Sampson might be a really good handcuff this year. So we just need to monitor the first couple weeks. And I think that Quinshon is more of a volume bet than an offense bet. Next is DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift last year was pretty remarkable with Ben Johnson in the offense. He scored 1,400 scrimmage yards. He had 10 touchdowns. I think the only problem was that Kyle Monangai became involved and kind of took some key moments away from him. But other than that, I mean, I think that his floor is pretty high. I don't think his ceiling is very high, but I think he's got a little bit of competition. With Ben Johnson, when he was in Detroit, he had David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, and both of them producing as RB1s. So I think that DeAndre Swift has a great outlook this year and the years going forward with Ben Johnson. Okay, so now at RB23, I've got Bhayshul Tuten. I think his rookie numbers were very, very modest. He only averaged 3.7 yards a carry, but he did score 7 touchdowns on the ground on fewer than 100 touches. I think that with Travis Etienne leaving, they're leaving nearly 300 touches on the ground, and he's the next man in line. He's very athletic, very fast, quick, and they bring in Chris Rodriguez for competition, but I think that he'll end up winning out the clear RB1 role. I think he's one of the biggest projection bets in fantasy this year. I think that he's extremely explosive, but like I said, I think that he is dealing with a little competition, and until we see him with a clear RB1 role, I think he's fine right here. Taking him around 60. David Montgomery. So David Montgomery obviously is traded over to the Houston Texans, who with Joe Mixon, I honestly don't even really know what's going on with that Joe Mixon thing, but obviously David Montgomery is going to be the lead back there. The problem is that we kind of saw him stop getting work in Detroit, and with Jahmyr Gibbs as explosive as he is, so they traded him away, and I think now he's 29, so age is kind of a concern here. But he has scored 33 rushing touchdowns over the last 3 seasons. So I think that he's going to be really good, but I don't think the Houston Texans offense is just going to be very good. It's going to depend on how their offensive line plays this year and if the defense can just keep them in games. So now going into Tier 5, these are not players that I'm depending on as my RB1. I'm drafting them for standalone, flex production, role growth, or the upside they would gain if their backfield were to change. So to start it off, we've got TreVeyon Henderson, who initially off the bat, extremely explosive, and he put up extremely efficient yards. But the problem is that they continued using Rhamondre Stevenson, which we'll talk about here in a second. And, you know, but the problem even here is New England drafted him and he showed exactly why. He creates long touchdowns and averaged more than 5 yards per carry. The concern is that they still trusted Stevenson more in pass protection and important playoff situations than they did Henderson. He has the greater ceiling than Stevenson, but this might still be a true committee back going forward. Next is Jaylen Warren. It's pretty much a similar situation with Rico Dowdle that TreVeyon has with Rhamondre with a committee back. But I still think that he can produce. Last year he produced 1,300 scrimmage yards. He had 8 touchdowns while in being a solid PPR starter. I think that Rico Dowdle is going to get maybe some early down work and also the goal line work. He's going to eat into that. Warren may be one of the most efficient running backs on the entire list. He creates missed tackles. He adds receiving value and just produced 1,300 scrimmage yards. But Dowdle's arrival lowers the touchdown and carry ceiling, but Warren remains the more valuable PPR option and has enough standalone work to remain useful at his price. Next is Tony Pollard. So Tony Pollard last year had a career best 1,082 yards on 242 carries. He also added 33 receptions, so he does have some receiving game. The problem is he only scored 5 touchdowns last year. And also last year, he created less forced missed tackles and a career low rushing grade last year. So I think that they're going to reduce his role. He also has Tyjae Spears there with a little bit of competition. And also, so Tony Pollard has quietly rushed for 1,000 yards over the past 4 seasons, and he remains Tennessee's starter. The problem is the explosiveness and receiving production have been declining. So now that they have multiple backs who can absorb that, I think that, he is still a stable depth option, but he needs touchdowns or another large workload year to become more relevant in fantasy. So at running back 28, I've got the rookie Jadarian Price at Seattle Seahawks. It's pretty clear the Seattle Seahawks traded away Kenneth Walker and then go out and draft Jadarian Price in the first round. He's got the draft capital. Doesn't really have any competition. Charbonnet is there, but Charbonnet is also recovering from an injury. So early in the year, I don't think he really has any competition, at least for the first few weeks. My only worry is that he was not a big producer in college, obviously sitting behind the number 1 running back in the class, Jeremiyah Love. But he was not a great receiver in college, and I think that he has the size. He has the explosive play profile that Seattle wants after moving on from Kenneth Walker. The upside is that he could become the lead running back immediately and just run off with it. So I think the upside is really there for him. I think Charbonnet could take some early down, maybe some goal line carries from him. But I think the receiving game can still use a little work. But like I said, I think he has a lot of upside in this tier, if not the most in this tier. Next, we have Rhamondre Stevenson, which we've talked a little bit about already. So last year, while still competing with TreVeyon with carries, he still somehow managed to amass 600 yards on the ground while still catching 32 passes in the air. He was highly efficient. Age isn't really a super concern. He's 28, so it's nothing crazy of a concern. But you do have TreVeyon Henderson, who's younger, more explosive. But they seem to trust Rhamondre for whatever reason. They seem to trust him. So I think he's got a higher floor, lower ceiling. I think he's the safer pick of the committee if you think it's trending that way. So next on this is obviously another committee back in Rico Dowdle. The Rico Dowdle experience last year was insane. Carolina. He ended up totaling over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, and adding 39 receptions. So this is his second year of 1,000 yards plus. But I think that Warren is still going to get the majority of the receiving work, while Dowdle will be used more in the goal line and the red zone. So I think his touchdown upside is pretty big. But like I said, I think it's going to be more of a committee backfield. So I think Warren's the safer pick here than Dowdle. And then last on this list of my tiers at RB31, we have RJ Harvey. So RJ Harvey finishes rookie year with nearly 900 scrimmage yards and 12 touchdowns, which that included 47 catches. So he is a true PPR fantasy back. I think the problem with RJ Harvey coming into the year is his competition. They're bringing J.K. Dobbins back and also Coleman's arrival. It could become a 3-player committee. His yards per carry was kind of a concern, so we'll see going forward. But Harvey did become a legitimate fantasy player last year when Dobbins went down. And his 47 receptions and 12 touchdowns show why Sean Payton values him. The concern is that Dobbins is back, and Denver added another rookie, creating potential crowded committee. But Harvey has standalone receiving value himself, but he needs the workload for it to break his way again. Okay, so that was my 2026 breakdown of the top running backs entering this year. So which running backs am I too high on? Which running backs am I disrespecting? Make sure you drop 2 names down in the comments below. And check the link in the description for a free 2026 championship framework that you can use. And you can use these rankings for in your upcoming draft.